Hello, good afternoon. We're going to start the lunchtime discussion now. Hope you all are getting settled and enjoying your meal. Let the noise settle down. I hate to interrupt conversations, but we have a great conversation we want to share with you for lunchtime. My name's Kif Scheuer. I'm the Climate Change Program Director for the Local Government Commission. I'm going to talk as loud as I can until people quiet down, work our way into this discussion. So today's lunch panel is called Changing the Business Climate for Climate Change. And when we set out to create this forum, we had a lot of discussions. It was put on by the Local Government Commission in partnership with the state of California. And there's a big piece missing in there, which is the private sector. And we had a lot of conversations about how we can get the private sector to the table, literally and figuratively. And it's been a real honor and opportunity for us. This is a session that I helped put together that I'm really excited about because it's so important that this conversation not just stick in the public sector, not be the typical NGO community and local government folks and state and federal government folks. We really get private sector to the table. But that's a hard conversation to have. It's not always easy, it's not always comfortable. We often talk about each other, but we don't always talk with each other. And so we really wanted to bring this conversation here in a pretty highlighted way. And we're fortunate in California that we have a lot of leading private sector actors who are, just as the state is, just as our local governments are doing, just as many of the NGOs are doing, they're paving the way. And so we're fortunate to have that opportunity for them to share here today. So before we get into this, I just wanted to say a few logistical points. Of course, we have our reception from 5:30 to 7:30 tonight. Super excited. You all should have your drink tickets. It's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of art on display. We did a whole unique partnership with a number of artists that's being featured throughout out in the hall there. And tonight at the reception, we'll have a number of installations set up. So I hope you enjoy that. Those of you who signed up for the completely full Adaptation Pub Trivia, good on you, because it's going to be the world's first climate adaptation pub trivia contest with super mystery prizes. So, you know, it's going to be awesome. But if you didn't make the sign up, you can still go out to a local bar. There are lots of them around here and they're quite fine. So I hope you enjoy yourself after the reception. If you've not already seen our sign-ups for networking lunch tables, this is really a conversation for you and with you. So propose a topic if there's something that you don't see on the agenda, or look at one of the topics that's been proposed and sign up and join a conversation. This will be at Wednesday at lunch, so it's really another chance for you all to build the community of practitioners that we're hoping to build out of this event. There are also a number of informal networking meetings going on in the morning. They're in the program, and also this afternoon there's a Switzer Fellowship networking meeting right before the reception. Encourage you to go check those out. A number of groups will be talking and sharing their information and just generally getting to know you and you getting to know them. So that's all our forum business. Now I want to turn to the panel, and as I said before, this is a really great opportunity to bridge a conversation between the public sector and the private sector. We're all here to work together, and we need to get to know each other in order to do that. And I think we're honored right now to have Kish Rajan, who's the director of the Governor's Office of Business Development, here to help set the stage for this bridging conversation. Kish brings to the job a 20-year record of success in both the public and private sectors. After graduating, Kish had an initial public sector career on Capitol Hill, but then spent 14 years in the private sector, and as if that wasn't enough, he decided to get his JD and then came back to serve in the public sector as a council member in the city of Walnut Creek. And 2 years ago, he was tapped, based on this sort of dual experience in both worlds, to work with the governor's team in the Office of Business Development, where he's been leading the charge to be a better engagement for the private sector in California. So Kish, welcome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, this is fun. Thanks. Hey, Kif, thanks. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. It's fun to be here, and it is nice to be the business guy in a room of people that are traditionally viewed as folks that don't understand or appreciate the economic implications of what we do. So it's nice to be able to dispel those myths and have the kind of conversation with one another that Kif was just mentioning. So I'm definitely glad to be here. And I'm glad to be able to introduce the panel that's going to come up here in just a minute. You're going to get treated at lunch here by a very rich conversation of really capable business people, business leaders, leading organizations in the state that are moving their own organizations forward in a way that's considerate of climate adaptation and the challenges that we face, but the opportunities that we face as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation also. But just to make a couple of quick remarks in advance of that, it's clear, and for those of you that have been here today, you're hearing that Governor Brown is steadfastly committed to not just national but global leadership on the matter of climate change. And our trips to China, the recent trip to Mexico, the relationships that we're striking internationally are proving that California is indeed a global leader on addressing the issues of climate change, and we will continue to do that. Now, as the business guy on the team, I've also got to help bring that balance to ensure that our climate policies, as they move forward, as they will, are also considerate of the business and economic implications of what that means to our state's economy. And you know that we get criticized all over the country. There are governors in famous states all over the United States that love to make hay about the fact that California, boy, we're just a land of fruits and nuts out here. We've made a decision that it's all about the economy. It's all about the environment. It's not about the economy. We've made a fundamental choice, right, that we don't favor economic growth and business development. Well, we're here to continue to prove to them that that is just simply not the case. And now that a few of them in particular have some distractions that they have to deal with down in their part of the world, we'll let them deal with that while we continue to prove that, here's the bottom line is that California's economy is growing. We're once again the 8th largest economy on planet Earth. And California's economy is growing not in spite of our climate goals, but because of them, right? Because we are creating a whole new era. Thank you. Because we're creating a whole new era of innovation, new technologies, new products and services, whether it's solar, whether it's storage, whether it's new fuels, whether it's new types of vehicles. California is leading the way in the development of these businesses. We are creating thousands of jobs and contributing billions of dollars into California's economy, and we're just getting started. We are proving that we can harmonize our climate objectives and our business objectives, and we're doing it very, very successfully. So as the Safeguarding California plan referenced, while we work on these areas of trying to reduce climate impact, we clearly also have to be focused on adapting to climate change. And we are also finding that to be an opportunity to innovate and grow our businesses as well. So I'm glad now to be able to turn this over to our panel, where you're going to hear from people that are going to be talking in some specificity about the things that they're doing in their leading organizations as well. I'll let the moderator introduce the wonderful folks that will be speaking with you, but let me mention who the moderator is. We're particularly pleased and I think grateful to have a tremendous expert and a thought leader in this area moderating our panel. Joel McCower has been a well-respected voice on business and sustainability and innovation. He's the chairman and executive editor of the GreenBiz Group. That's the creator of greenbiz.com, and as well as countless research reports and events and other ways to talk about corporate sustainability strategies and trends. He's been dubbed by the Associated Press as the guru of green business, so who better to bring forward our panel and engage you all and engage them in a rich conversation. So folks, please join me in welcoming your moderator, Joel McCower.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. We are the private sector, and we're here to help. Thank you, Kish, for that great tee-up. Thank you, Kish and Kif and Kate. I can see how they drafted people to put this together. For this amazing turnout. It's really very exciting what's been going on, not just in this room, but in all the other rooms and in the hallways, the tremendous sharing of information and of course, the networking. And as I always like to point out, the great part about networking is that it's just one letter off from not working. But we're going to take a little bit of a different turn here and talk about the world of business. So in a world where extreme weather in Thailand can decimate the global market for disk drives for the better part of a year, or where the Mississippi River can go from a record high to a record low in just 14 months, dramatically affecting not just traffic, but all the commerce that goes up and down that river, everything from coal to car parts, where the drought in the Central Valley can affect global markets of everything from broccoli to biofuels. How do you think about what it means to be a sustainable business? How do you think about resilience? How do you think about adaptation? That's part of what we're going to talk about here. It really is sort of in true Dickinsonian sense of the best and worst of times here. On one hand, there's this incredible disruption going on. There's this huge amount of uncertainty and risk that a changing climate brings. And one thing that business hates is uncertainty and risk. And so that's a big problem for anyone in business, whether you're a global company or a local one, how to think about how this affects your future. On the other hand, there's this incredible amount of innovation taking place that is so exciting. This is what we focus on in our world at GreenBiz, the innovation that's happening and how companies are redesigning their products and processes and even their business models to in a world where climate becomes a constraint, how technology is accelerating those opportunities, the convergence of technologies around energy, transportation, information, buildings, food, and ag, and how, when they come together in the ways that they are, can radically affect how much we dematerialize and how we create radical efficiency and think about things in a systems view instead of at the component view that most of us think about, whether we're in the public or private sector. The incredible partnerships that are taking place, not just within the public and private sector, but among companies across industries and size and sector and geography to solve a lot of these problems together and figure out, how do we ask the big questions, the what would it take questions in terms of addressing what needs to be addressed. And when you put all this together, it really is an incredibly exciting time to be in business. There's the promise of new levels of efficiency, of radical resource productivity, higher levels of asset utilization, decentralization in ways that allows ultimately for resilience in all the different ways we think about resilience, economic resilience, weather and climate resilience, resilience against market or terrorism or any other things that come down the pike. So I feel so blessed in my company that we get to work with the leaders who are doing these things. We convene them from across the country and around the world to come to our events and our membership groups where they learn from one another. And so when Kif asked me to bring together some California companies to talk about these things, I knew exactly who to call. And so it's very exciting to have three of California's really iconic companies and organizations here on stage with me, starting with, to my immediate right is Kathy Gerwig, who's the Vice President for Employee Safety, Health and Wellness and Environmental Stewardship at Kaiser Permanente, and author of just out this book called Greening Healthcare, which if you have anything to do, yes, give it up for the new author, first-time author. If you're in the healthcare field at all or deal with healthcare field, this is, I think, going to be the Bible of what you want to know in terms of how it links to sustainability across its many dimensions. You have a book out too? No, to the right of them are two slackers who don't have books. Christopher Benjamin is a Director of Corporate Sustainability at Pacific Gas and Electric Company, the state's largest utility, and I think it's still the largest investor-owned utility in the country, or one of the largest. And at the other end of the table is my good friend Stephanie Rico, Vice President of Environmental Affairs at Wells Fargo and Company. So let's just start by asking each of you, just to frame this, the topic of this event, how do you each talk about adaptation in your organizations? Is that a word that even comes up? And if not, what words do you use to talk about whatever adaptation means to you? What does it mean at Kaiser Permanente?
Well, we talk about climate action, and that has both sides. It has the work to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it has adaptation as part of it, because if you don't have both sides, you're not solving the problem. And so we think about it also in terms of, in both of those ways, what it means to our infrastructure. So reducing greenhouse gas emissions, there's a lot of energy used in hospitals. They're like little cities, and they're 24/7 operations. So you think about all we can do on the side of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And then on adaptation, clearly we have infrastructures that people need to have be resilient. So it all, I guess in sum, what I'd say, we think about it in terms of health, not surprisingly, but I think actually everybody in this room has the connection to health, because we want people to be healthy, we want communities to thrive, and communities can't do that when they are impacted by environmental problems like climate change. So we draw a direct connection between our mission. We are, by the way, maybe I'm also unique on this panel, because Kaiser Permanente is a not-for-profit health plan and hospital system, and our mission is to provide quality, affordable care and to improve the health of the communities we serve. So we draw a direct line between the health of our communities and preventing impacts to that health. And what more important impact of the century is there than climate change?
Well, let's drill down just a little bit, because when we talk about adaptation to what? What do you see happening that you, as in your business terms, how do you describe it? Is this about disruption? Is this about an influx of new patients because of climate related? What do you need to adapt to, and sort of what's happening? What's the most near term of those?
Well, in terms of adaptation, there's kind of the immediate and the longer term. So the immediate is being ready for severe weather events and to be able to provide health care to people who need it, who are impacted by that. And that means you have to keep your doors open when there's a severe weather event. So we've just completed an inventory of flood risk at our facilities in California at the 100 and 500-year flood levels. And now we're piloting strategies to mitigate that risk, and we'll be prioritizing how we proceed. So that's looking at keeping the doors open, having your emergency power, potable water, all the things you would think about in those situations. And then there's the longer term, which I think of more around our having robust research to spot health trends that are occurring because of climate impacts, and then being able to treat people who are being impacted, whether it's from infectious disease, waterborne pathogens, allergies, mental health impacts are all things that when you're a healthcare provider, we expect to see more of in the future. So we need to be able to trend that through research and then react to it clinically.
Well, we'll come back, because there's a lot you talked about that we want to get deeper in, but I also think it's worth pointing out that all three of your companies are what I would consider critical infrastructure during a time of disruption, earthquake, severe weather, terrorism, whatever it is, that we need to keep the lights on, we need to keep, get people healthy and back in action, and we need to have the money to keep the financial flowing, whether it's for food and water and shelter or just markets in general. So that is, I think, a really important part of why you're all here, and what's at stake here in terms of what happens and what we need to be adapting for and mitigating against. Chris, tell us about adaptation at PG&E.
Sure, happy to do so. And also, I just want to say thanks to Joel and for all of you for having us here. And I'm just struck by how many people are here at this conference engaging on this topic. I think it just shows that the level of interest and engagement, I think it's just a really good sign. But as Joel mentioned, we provide gas and electricity to about nearly 16 million people in Northern and Central California. And when we think about adaptation, both from PG&E's perspective, but also I think increasingly within our industry, the term resilience is I think, really getting a lot of traction. Kathy just mentioned it. And it's also, I think, part of a broader commitment on the part of utilities to address climate change. And I think we talked a little bit about this in the session earlier this morning. All of the steps that California has taken to reduce its emissions, whether that's a 35-plus year commitment to energy efficiency, renewable energy, vehicle emissions, and a whole host of things. And I think that has helped enable companies like PG&E to not only reduce our own footprint, but help enable customers like these two folks who have facilities to reduce their emissions. So it's hard to separate it, and I think it's good to think about it as a whole package. But from our perspective, we are an infrastructure business, and it's really important to think about what are the risks that you face. And from our perspective, it is just integral to just smart business planning. And some of the risks that come to mind for not only PG&E but for utilities relate to changing precipitation patterns. We have the largest privately owned hydroelectric system in the country. And for those from California, you're well aware that this is the third year of a drought. And so that requires us to pay very, very close attention to those changing precipitation patterns so we can operate our system in a way that maximizes the hydroelectric output, but also keeps in mind the downstream users, the customers on the other end of that water system. Increased electricity, when we see hotter temperatures, periods where the temperature increases for sustained periods, that increases people's electricity usage. You're running the air conditioner more. And so that's an important thing to be aware of and to plan for. As well as, and we heard about it this morning, increased frequency and risk of wildfires. And we're already seeing that here in California. We have a lot of assets, transmission lines, distribution lines. And so it's really important for us to be aware of those and to collaborate and coordinate with lots of other folks who are working on it. So there's a number of these. And so for us, it's really a matter of trying to understand, what these are, to factor that into our ongoing and longer term planning, within our business, and then also to collaborate, because we're just one business, one company, and these are complex issues.
So when you talk about planning, is there one thing that you're, again, as I asked Kathy, sort of more near term that you're sort of planning for, that you see coming sooner than later? Or are you just constantly, because of the nature of your business and where you're located, always sort of ready for anything?
I think for all the things that I mentioned, there's a short and a longer term, risk to it. So you sort of have to operate on both planes. And then also, I think one of the things that we've certainly seen, what we've been, we just as background, we identified this as a risk back, 8 or 9 years ago, and set up some governance structures within our company to understand and manage it, including a science team, that studies the research. And many utilities have done a similar thing. And so I think you really do have to sort of operate on both planes. And just to give the hydro as an example, there's the short-term need to really maximize the hydroelectric output from the system, but also a longer-term need, and I think this is where the research comes in, to try to understand what are the likely projections for decreases in snowpack and other things, so that you can plan for that, and who are the organizations that we can work with to collaborate on that research.
Stephanie at Wells Fargo, what do you talk about? Do you talk about adaptation? Do you talk about resilience? How do you refer to this?
Okay. Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. So, first of all, I would like to also say thank you very much for having us. And I'm going to answer your question, I promise. But I also want to say that, when I was invited to come here, I was a little hesitant because we're still wrapping our arms around climate adaptation. But now that I'm here, I'm thrilled to be here. And one of the reasons is, as I was outside, a number of people came up to me and said, well, Wells Fargo, what is a bank? Why are you guys here? So I think it's just really important, and I want you all to know that we are, and for sure we're not the only business, obvious, that thinking about climate change and climate adaptation initiatives. And the words that we use to describe climate change adaptation, it's not there's many words. There's resiliency, there's straight up climate change adaptation. And one of the phrases that really resonated with me that I heard one of our lines of businesses use is this concept of left of boom. And it came from...
Let's just go, left of boom.
Left of boom, yes.
Right.
And what that means is, and just us on the side, we have been hiring a number of veterans, and I think it came from the military, and the idea of the boom is an explosion or an event or something that happens, and if you're right of boom, you're responding, so it's after the fact. And our business continuity planning group, we're really good at right of boom. An emergency, a disaster happens, our business continuity plans kick in, and we're there. We're there for our customers, we account for our team members, and there's a lot happening. But with respect to climate change adaptation, it's different. It's about being left of boom. Okay, we know the boom is coming, right? And so it's thinking about, well, what can we do? We can't do everything alone, but what can we do to mitigate what's coming, right? And that's the way we're looking at it.
I mean, you said it, you know it's coming. Is that all the way up in the C-suite? Did they say climate change is coming? We know it. It's a fact. We need to be ready for it. Is that a given? Because I think the public perception, not of Wells, but of business in general, is that's not always the case.
So the company, we don't have currently a climate change statement that says, boom, for sure it's happening, et cetera, but we do have environmental goals, and we're active, that are sanctioned from the highest level. We have a board that's focused on sustainability, and so, for example, our actions are such that we are working to reduce our absolute greenhouse gas emissions and focusing on energy efficiency, et cetera.
So when you worry about climate change affecting Wells, because so much of banking is now digital, it's ones and zeros, and I'm not talking about Bitcoin. It's about, we can do it from anywhere. We can do it from sitting right here on our phones. So it's less of an infrastructure where you have a hospital or a power generating facility. What are you concerned about happening that would be problematic for Wells?
So it goes down to the community. And so we're as strong as our communities. And if our communities are weak, we're weak. And so it's so interconnected. And so it's protecting the communities and protecting businesses.
Talk a little more about that. What would a bank do to protect its communities against the ravages of the climate?
So we're going to figure that out together. That's why we're here. We're going to have that conversation.
Okay.
Honestly, I have some ideas, but don't have all the answers. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come today, is to say we want to be part of the conversation and part of the solution to figure it out. Yeah. But, not having the answers, some examples include, working to, finance potentially climate adaptation initiatives. So we can do that. Also, I think that as a significant employer, an important component of this has to do with developing a very tolerant and inclusive culture. And I think that if you're going to have a resilient city, there's infrastructure needs, but there's also cultural awareness and a sense of being able to kind of get along better. That is an important and sometimes overlooked ingredient to resilient cities. Yeah. And so we can do that with our, within our workplace, and hopefully some of that can carry over.
No, that makes perfect sense, and I appreciate the honesty that we don't have the answers and we're here to figure them out together. That's a terrific, I think, message to this community and to your customers in general. One of the things I think that we haven't talked about yet, that you all obviously share lots of employees. Back of the envelope, among the three of you, you've got almost 250,000 employees in California. And that they're going to be affected by this both personally, they're also going to have trouble getting to work. I remember sitting at Climate Week last year in New York and hearing Con Edison talk about the fact that their employees couldn't get gas to put in their personal vehicles to come to wherever they needed to be to help fix things after Superstorm Sandy. How do your employees play into this, both in terms of your stewardship of them, which you will need to be resilient in an event, but also helping them play a larger role? Stephanie, you want to start?
Sure. So for us, it's definitely protecting and accounting for our team members, especially on the right of boom. But it's also about creating because we want to be environmentally minded in all we do, so it's about creating and supporting a culture. In some cases, our team members are well ahead of us as far as, we should be doing X, Y, and Z on the environmental front. But we have green teams, and there's a bottom up, and there's a top down, and there's a midway. It's building that culture of environmental stewardship is really part of the role with respect to our team members.
And is that coming, because I've seen this work different ways in different companies, is that being driven from sort of bottom up, or in some companies, the senior management says, we're going to do this, we want every employee to know this, and we're going to commit to this and award and recognize things. Sometimes it's the other way. It's the employees, start this, and then senior management sees a parade and wants to get in front of it. What's driving it at Wells Fargo?
All of the above. It really depends on where you're at within the company, but it's a little bit of all.
And what's your team? You have this team of, half dozen people in the company? Or?
We do. We have a team of, there's 7 of us within environmental affairs, and then we have a separate environmental finance team and clean tech team. But within our group, it's 7 people, and think of us as internal advocates for carrying out our company-sanctioned goal to integrate environmental mindfulness in all we do. Yeah. And so it's an open position now, but we had somebody who was running or overseeing our green team initiatives, and the idea behind that was, initiatives would come up, which is great, but it needs some focus, and so we put some kind of focus around it, so we're all kind of marching down the same road. Yeah. So it's organized.
One of the things that's remarkable, not just about these 3 companies, but about any big company of any size, billion-dollar-plus organizations like these, is that the people like Kathy, Chris, and Stephanie who run environmental affairs tend to be parts of armies of 3 or 6 or maybe 8 people in multi-billion-dollar global companies that have these huge mandates of what they're supposed to be doing, and maybe to fulfill huge commitments that companies have made, but these tiny teams, and so you have to work via influence and collaboration and bridge building and partnerships, and it's really kind of remarkable, the work that you do. You going to say something?
It sounds similar to politics.
Politics? Okay, well, maybe. Yeah, probably right. Chris, talk about the employee base and how you both engage them, protect them, and work with them around adaptation.
Well, I think one part of it is just planning, good planning, and I think that's something that a lot of people are probably talking about in today's sessions and thinking about when you think about adaptation. Is these for many of these issues, it's a sort of a slow-moving, longer-term issue that if you plan for now, you can reduce the risk and do so effectively. So within the utility industry, many, including PG&E, companies have emergency preparedness, planning organizations that develop plans, do drills around earthquakes or wildfires or things of that nature. And so there are folks who are integrally involved in that, as well as just this idea of adaptation more generally. We've, I think, had some governance structures in place to look at this issue. But I'd say even within the last year, just more and more people we are realizing from within the company are touched by this issue, and we're bringing more and more folks under the tents. I think the key with your kind of broader employee base, and this is not unique to companies, is finding specific things for them to do. I think this is kind of a hard issue to get your arms around, So we did our first ever water conservation challenge, this year, which is something specific that employees could do to help address the drought and track, and we got incredible, levels of participation. So trying to translate the issue of resilience or adaptation into some specific actionable things that employees can do and try to make it fun. So that they're learning, but they're also, doing. And then your employees are your best ambassadors, because once they've sort of become personally involved, they've got families, they've got neighborhoods, they've got friends that they can help, further engage.
Good. Kathy, to talk about Kaiser employees, how do you work with them?
We've used the term resilience here to mean sort of infrastructure resilience, and I'd say I also am responsible for employee wellness at Kaiser Permanente, and we talk about resilience of our workforce, and they mean the same thing. So in the same way we want to strengthen facilities, we want employees to be able to handle whatever issues may be coming up, whether it has to do with climate change or any other sort of, healthcare reform is another great example, any pressure in the organization. And so we work very hard on that and have a variety of programs. Some of them relate directly to environmental stewardship, but it has more to do with a broader sense around resilience.
We're going to get the hook way before we're ready. So I want to go through two more quick questions, and I need to ask you to sort of do quick answers, but to which are admittedly not short questions. But what do you need from these fine people? What do you need from the public sector, the nonprofit sector, to help you do what you need to do better? Kathy?
I think there are some lessons from the seismic work that hospitals have been through in the last couple decades. If you remember, after the Northridge earthquake, a law was passed that said hospitals needed to be able to withstand earthquakes, and that resulted in tens of billions of dollars being spent in this state to either rebuild or renovate about half the hospitals. And from that, we learned a lot about resilience, and we learned a lot about working in partnership. And I'd say that had a lot of focus. Business was at the table along with all the other players, and it made it possible so that today we have hospitals that are going to withstand far more powerful earthquakes than we've had. And I think that provides some lessons that are appropriate here. That kind of alignment, collaboration, focus, vision, all of that. I think it's definitely time for that, and we need to work together on it.
So you want to find more ways to collaborate with this? On
a shared vision, shared priorities, clear focus. We all need to do that together.
Great. Well, this sounds like the place to kick that off. Chris?
And I would speak not just from PG&E, but maybe from just businesses in general, tools, that we can use, because there's a lot of research, there's a tremendous amount of information and effort going on, but translating that into tools that people can use to make better decisions is, I think, going to be critically helpful, because in part because there's so much going on, just even here in California, it's hard for businesses to keep track of it, to engage with it. And so thinking about how you can translate that into things people can do, even if it's not perfect, it gives people a window into how to make better decisions. And I think that's just going to serve us all better in the long run.
So tools is a big term. What digital tools, databases, mapping
tools, boiling the research down into some likely trends. Looking at, okay, there's 10 different reports out, that are projecting different, potential impacts, whether it's precipitation or what have you. What's a reasonable expectation, given all of this, uncertainty here that we could forecast. And then I think also, thinking about some sort of maybe shorter incremental milestones. We all think about the year 2050 or the year 2100. For businesses, it's hard to think about the year 2100. I mean, we tend to think in maybe 2030, 2050 at sort of the end of our planning horizon. So trying to maybe work on some shorter term time frames that give us some better guideposts.
Great. Stephanie, you tipped your hand a little bit about in terms of starting a conversation here, but what would you like, what do you need?
So I would say at least two things. One would be, please, as you're thinking about climate adaptation initiatives, especially as you are likely to come to whether it be Wells Fargo or another financial institution, for financing of these projects, please come to us early as it looks like it's taking shape and we're engaged early on in the process. It works out better that way. I'll just say that. Then two, Chris calls it tools. I don't know if this is a tool, but a common framework for thinking about and talking about climate change adaptation would be incredibly helpful. And I think that's going to be a collaborative effort on how that kind of takes shape and what it would look like. But having a common way to talk about it, think about it, especially as it relates to California, would be incredibly helpful.
Great. So finally, when we all meet back here on stage for the California Adaptation Forum 2016, 2 years, what's the story that you all want to be able to tell about your companies and adaptation that you may not be able to tell today? Kathy, let's start with you.
I would like to be able to tell the story about how healthcare considerations have been embedded in the work that all of the attendees in 2016 are doing, that we have a clear focus, that we have aligned priorities, that we know how much it's going to cost, what we need to be doing together. That would be, I think it's aggressive and doable.
Chris?
You know, I think about just broadening the tent. I mean, it's a really impressive number of people here, but I'm guessing that there are whole parts of this conversation that where this conversation is relevant, but they're not here. And I'm thinking about risk management. I'm thinking about, folks that engage with, maybe GIS, professionals, different parts of your company or your organization where, they're part of this equation. And so I guess I would envision a, maybe 2 or 3 even times the size of this, with a lot of folks who are broadening the tent, within the conversation, and that there's even greater familiarity among the people in the room about what everyone else is doing, because it's all related.
Stephanie.
Joel, I'm going to cheat real quick and add one more thing to my last answer. And this is important. There is one more thing I would like from you all, and that is when you do come, if and when you do come to us, please talk about climate adaptation so that the need or the project that we're financing, that it's clear to our bankers that it's climate adaptation related, so that the demand for climate adaptation financing is seen. Because if you don't talk about it, if you don't call it climate adaptation, we're going to think it's something else, and we're not going to be able to see the full demand, and we know the demand is there, but it's not always visible.
So you want your bankers to hear that there's a demand for something related to this thing called climate adaptation?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Just
you.
Our little secret. Don't let it out of this room.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
Oh,
You asked.
contagious.
A lot of times when I think about adaptation, it's very similar to how we define it. It's very similar to the question people often ask, well, how do you define sustainability? And I guess maybe that's another hope, is that whether we call it adaptation, resilience, readiness, whatever, there's more recognition, whether if you're an emergency response professional, or somebody that does infrastructure asset planning, or a risk manager. I think the more, even if we're not using the same words, the more that people are aware that these concepts are the same thing and that they're related to one another, is going to be a really good thing, and maybe greater just alignment around the vocabulary, so that people are more conversant.
And that's true in this whole sustainability space, whether it's talking about efficiency or risk, and they're two sides of the same coin that different people would want to hear it in their own language. But Stephanie, your story for 2016.
So ideally, I would like to be able to report back that we have a common framework through which to view climate adaptation throughout the company.
Well, there's clearly so much more we could be talking about, but the part of what needs to happen is you need to take a break, and then you need to go into the next part of this afternoon. But it's very clear that there's a huge untapped collaboration potential that needs to be seized here. among not just these three companies, but the private sector in general. And I hope that as this event continues and to grow even bigger than what's here, that this isn't just the first conversation or the last conversation that you have, that the private sector becomes a greater part of this. We certainly look forward to that. And before I turn this back over to Kif, please join me in thanking Stephanie, Chris, and Kathy.
Good job, Joe.
Kif?
There's a little step there. Please enjoy the rest of your lunch, what's left, and head on out into the next breakout sessions, which will be starting shortly. We thank you all for your time and thank these guys for coming and sharing their words. And as they've invited you to collaborate with them, make sure you grab them before they head home.